Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Dearborn Home Care. Very glad you are joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. You know, we always like to get our information from the people who are learning and fighting for us. One of those, Beryl Amedee, State Representative from District 51 in Gray. Welcome back to the program, Beryl.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
I appreciate that. There was a lot going on in this session. It was busy.
It was.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things that went well, some of the bills that passed.
Sure. As you said, it was a busy session. We started off with handling what I think might be a record number of bills.
Oh, my.
I have the historians at the Capitol looking into it for me, but 2,100 instruments. That's bills and resolutions all together.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was a lot.
2,100.
2,100. So
Wow.
if we seemed a little tired when we came out of Baton Rouge, that might be why.
Yeah, that's a lot of thinking.
And a lot of reading.
Right, and figuring
studying.
out what is or isn't the right thing to do and where to go for you and your constituents.
Yes, fortunately, we were past all of the COVID restrictions, so this year we were able to have plenty of public input. Lots of people came to the Capitol to speak in committee, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of those things you always wonder, because I've done that several times with social work bills and things that were really impacting some social issues. Been there, spoken with a lot of our representatives. You ever wonder, for me, I've wondered, but I'm glad to hear you say that that's helpful.
It is. It makes a difference. Every legislator comes from a certain background of their own. None of us can be experts in every subject that's going to come before us on our desk and that we have to vote on. So when we hear from the public, when we hear from experts in their field, it really helps, because then we have a better picture of the effects of the bill that we're voting on, whether it's going to be beneficial or not.
Terrific. Let's talk about some of those that did pass.
Okay, very good. Well, first of all, as we do every year, we passed a budget. So the
Right.
budget comes in multiple bills, and also every year the budget that we pass is balanced because the law requires that it's balanced.
Right.
And I always say you might not like how it's balanced, but it is. And so the budget this year was $47 million when you consider all the sources, which is a record. I don't even have to ask staff to research that one.
Right.
47 billion. Did I say million?
You said million, but it's 47 billion.
$47 billion. And a lot of that money came from the federal government, especially in the form of coronavirus relief funding and then disaster relief funding.
Right.
So some of that will not be repeating. It won't be coming back next year.
Right.
I mean, let's hope. We don't want
No,
any
we don't want
disasters.
to have to deal with Corona. We certainly don't want to deal with another Ida.
That's right.
So we would rather not have that necessary funding.
That's right. So we call it non-recurring funds. And so
Okay.
we have to budget our regular expenses on money that we expect to recur every year.
Right.
Anyway, so the budget is passed. And again, the bulk of the budget goes to healthcare and education. And then everything else divides the rest of the money.
Right.
And this year, the topics that we handled were inspired by a lot of what we've been through. This was a regular session, meaning it was not a fiscal-only session.
Right.
So we could bring bills on any number of topics, and we did. And so a lot of the bills we saw were because of what we went through during the COVID shutdowns and after the hurricane. So with labor, I'll start there. With labor, one of the big issues was the unemployment trust fund, the fund where all the unemployment benefits come from. Businesses pay into that, and so we had completely used the entire balance, and we have to replenish that. So we passed measures and funding so that we can replenish that fund, hopefully without having to go through any increase in what businesses pay. And so we're expecting that by the end of 2023, the fund will be completely recovered and we won't see any increases.
And again, no increases to impact an area that's been largely hit with, and we know the problems with our labor force right now, and a lot of that is because of these businesses really trying to come back. And so it's great to see that we're really fighting hard to not have to make increases.
Yes, small business especially is the backbone of our economy, and with the double whammy of COVID shutdowns and then Hurricane Ida, businesses can use a lot of help right now, and one thing we don't want to do is overburden them with an increase in a tax, and which was through no fault of their own.
Right,
So we've been able to do that. We also passed a small business innovation package, and that means that there will be federal grant money available for innovation, retention, and recruitment. So this will help our small businesses even more. And
and a great time for it.
yes, a necessary time for it. So
Right.
so good. Some of the efforts that we handled to try and combat the administrative overreach that we've seen through the excessive renewals of the health emergency, the declarations and the mandates, we felt that a lot of these violated our constitutional freedoms, and most of those bills, unfortunately, were not very successful. But some that did make it through have already been vetoed. But we can talk about vetoes another time.
Right.
And another area that we handled a lot of bills about insurance because of the catastrophe.
With Ida.
So one bill that we were able to pass prevents property owners from evicting tenants for 30 days in areas that are under a federal disaster declaration. So we can't have any instant evictions right after a major hurricane like this. And another one that we handled was about nursing homes because of the horrible stories that we heard after Ida. We passed a bill that requires that all nursing homes have an emergency preparedness plan as part of their licensing process, and that they would have to renew that every year, and that the fire marshal would inspect and approve of evacuation sites before the Department of Health can give approval.
Let's continue talking about the bills that passed.
Sure. As you know, insurance bills are coming out, and people are seeing some really scary numbers.
Right.
And also, since Ida, we've lost insurance companies even.
6 of them that I've been made aware of.
They're growing scarce.
Right.
So we were able to pass some legislation that may help. First of all, we passed a resolution, which is not a law. It's just an urge of Congress to review and reform the National Flood Insurance Program's new risk rating 2.0, as they call it. And I believe that Louisiana is not the only place that is going to suffer from extreme premium increases. Right. So we should have a lot of help in Congress from other states that are going to experience the same thing.
Right.
So hopefully Congress will respond and review and reform all that before we lose any more insurance companies or properties because of high insurance rates.
Right.
Other bills that we passed include a grant incentive that encourages new insurance companies to join the Louisiana property insurance market, and one that would require every company that offers insurance contracts to maintain a catastrophe response plan. And that's going to help us to hopefully not go through a lot of what we've been through, where there are certain insurance companies that seem to be completely unprepared and understaffed for such an event, and were unresponsive to the customers.
Right.
So hopefully these bills will help so that we don't repeat a lot of pain after the next disaster.
Yeah. Try and learn from the last one.
Yes. So besides disasters and such, we also had a lot of bills that came to fruition because of what I'll call current events.
Okay.
And or they were inspired by headlines and news stories about what's happening here and elsewhere. One of them is Mississippi. Their students have been increasing in their literacy scores, and we found out that about 3 years ago, Mississippi implemented heavily phonics-based reading programs, especially for their early elementary grades.
Okay.
And so they've been seeing the improvement for a few years now. So Louisiana has followed suit. This school year, we have already begun to implement heavily phonics-based reading programs in elementary schools, and I'm fully expecting that in the next 2 or 3 years, we will also see our students' reading scores just go through the roof. So we passed a number of bills related to literacy. One of them was to provide for actual books, little books that children can read, to be sent to the students' homes where there are students who are having difficulty in reading well. And so it's exciting to see a refocus on phonics because we know it works, and I'm expecting good news. Another was that we passed a bill to protect women's sports again, and as of today, the governor has not vetoed it this time.
Okay.
So that should stay put this time.
Okay.
Another was we knew that the rumors said that the Supreme Court was going to be overturning Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And so this legislative session, we had a bill that took 50 years worth of Louisiana legislation that's already on the books concerning abortion, and refined it and made it all work together, because we actually had some laws that conflicted one another.
Right.
And so all of the laws that were what we call trigger laws, that mean they're on the books, but they can't go into effect unless or until the Supreme Court acts, those laws were straightened out by a bill during this session. So when the Supreme Court took action a week ago, we were ready, and all those laws were already in place.
Okay, very good. Talking about preparedness, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like what emergency preparedness is about. Be prepared
Yes.
for what they may do so that we're ready, so we can put things in motion.
Right. Now, based on some things we experienced because of COVID over the last 2 years or more, we handled a lot of bills that dealt with immunizations, specifically. Often it was specifically the COVID shots. And what we were focusing on was trying to protect the rights of individuals to make decisions on their own and not be forced to have any medical procedure, especially a shot that's controversial, that may not be for everyone medically, or maybe because of religious objections. So there were a number of bills dealing with immunizations, and a few made it through and many didn't pass. But all in all, we had those bills plus others that dealt with medicine. And one of the good reports I wanted to be sure and give today was this one. Senate Bill 116 passed. It creates the Office on Women's Health and Community Health within the Department of Health to coordinate medical policy and treatment programs and services for women. Now, it's not because we don't love the guys.
No.
It's just because Louisiana, unfortunately, is at the top of a lot of bad lists when it concerns women's health and outcomes, especially for pregnancy and the newborn rates. We really want to see those improve, and I'm hoping that through having this specific department created, that we will see women's health outcomes improve in Louisiana shortly.
Well, and it's one of those things that we have to look at the data, and the data says, you know what, we're falling short in this area. I love the fact that we spend a little time and energy saying, let's just get a task force together and look at it and see what we can do about it, and maybe make some changes with that.
And I love that we created another department, but it's not a new department that we have to go out and find special funding for. It's just a designated department within one that already exists, that's already supposed to be doing this, and there will be a greater focus on policies and treatments to improve women's health outcomes.
We appreciate the updates, and again, echo how much was really going on. The last couple of segments, able to talk about the things that were passed, and there's always a number of things that don't pass, or some things that get vetoed. And sometimes we don't always look at those or see those. They kind of get glossed over. But I think it's important to look at the ones that maybe didn't pass.
Sure. We had a number of bills that were very popular, especially with the public. Lots of people came to the Capitol to testify. We got word from experts. We had presentations. And yet, some of them just didn't make it. Either they died in committee or maybe on the floor in the House or the Senate. And there are a number of organizations. Some of them have been around a few years, and some of them are brand new, grassroots organizations that have formed that want to follow the bills that did not pass, that are within their wheelhouse, and see if maybe we can bring some back next year and have a little more support.
Wow.
So I encourage grassroots efforts. The government's supposed to be for the people, of the people, by the people. And so when the public participates, I think we come to better conclusions that serve us all in better ways. So,
Well, and it teaches us not to give up, right? It says just because it didn't pass now doesn't mean it won't pass later.
yes, and there's that saying that bad bills pass instantly and good bills take a few years. So it's okay if we have some repeats.
A little bit of a joke on the hill. I like it.
Yes. So this year, though, just as we spoke about having what might be a record number of bills that we handled, we might have a record number of bills that have been vetoed.
Okay.
Because as of today, the governor has now vetoed nearly 30 bills that passed the House and the Senate with good majority. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we actually have a veto override session or not. We've received our ballots, and as you know, when the legislative session ends, a veto session is automatically scheduled about 40 days out.
Right.
And if we don't want to have a veto session, then legislators have to send in ballots saying we don't want to. So that's where we are right now. We have the ballots, and we'll have to wait and see if they receive a number of ballots necessary to cancel the session, or whether we're just going to have one. And if we do have one, it would start on July 16th.
Okay.
And so the reason that we're having a discussion about whether to have one is because of the topics included in these bills that the governor has vetoed. And I'll give you some samples here.
Okay.
He vetoed one that would broaden education options for students with special needs, and one that would help struggling readers to be able to have education savings accounts so that they could use that funding to maybe get tutoring or switch to a different school where that's a better fit for them. Concerning elections, he vetoed a bill that would ensure legitimate voting rolls, and one that would ensure that defective ballots, or those that might have been tampered with, would not be accepted in elections. A bill that would prevent federal encroachments on state autonomy in elections. And on another topic, let's see, justice reform. He vetoed a bill that codified the crime of resisting a police officer with violence, and one that would have required tracking of those who produce and use methamphetamines. A bill that would strengthen the penalties and the jail time for those who are convicted of stalking, and a bill that would have curtailed the early release of felons convicted of multiple sex offenses. So these are some of the topics, and there's more. Let's see. With the state Supreme Court case concerning Pastor Tony Spell, who continued to have church services even when the governor said he shouldn't, Pastor Tony Spell was the victor in that case, and even through that, the governor vetoed a bill that would provide equal protection for churches and other houses of worship during a pandemic. He also vetoed bills concerning vaccinations, like one that would have prevented vaccine discrimination and protect citizens from government-sponsored harassment when someone would not want to take a vaccine that the government would require. And another concerning transparency in government operations during an emergency response. So you can see by this variety of topics, there is good reason that a number of legislators would hope to have a veto override session.
Right.
Many of these bills passed with unanimous votes in the House and Senate, and most of these passed with a supermajority of the House and the Senate.
So we're talking a lot of people who voted yes for things and just goes to the governor and he vetoes it. There's a laundry list, if you will, of those.
That's right.
Upwards of some 30.
That's right.
And so the only other thing that I think we kind of wanted to spend a little time on was SCOTUS. Tell us a little bit about that and where we stand with it.
Sure. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has been pretty busy here lately. Mm-hmm. We've seen many headlines in the last few days. The biggest one, the one that made the most news, was the Roe versus Wade overturning. Right. And some people have said, well, the Supreme Court has automatically outlawed abortion nationwide. But I just wanted to be sure that people understand that's not exactly true.
Okay.
The Supreme Court has returned the authority back to the states by saying that the Supreme Court never really had this authority to begin with. So now it's up to each individual state to decide how they're going to regulate abortion and whether it'll be allowed in that state. And a few other cases they handled. Coach Kennedy, a case by Coach Kennedy, who offered silent prayer before a school football game. Coach Kennedy won, so that's okay. A Second Amendment victory concerning concealed carry, and they also issued a stay concerning redistricting map.
Wow. Lots of good information. Beryl, thank you so much for letting us know what was happening there in that session. We appreciate it. All right, guys, that will do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV.